Elias had always believed that silence was something peaceful. Growing up in a house where noise meant conflict, he learned to treasure quiet moments, to equate calm with safety. But lately, the silence in his apartment didn't feel calm at all. It felt heavy, almost sharp, like something that could cut if he listened too closely. On Tuesday evening, he sat at the small kitchen table, absently rotating a cold cup of coffee between his hands. The room was dim, lit only by a thin beam of sunlight sneaking through the half-closed blinds. Everything looked normal. The neatly arranged appliances, the faint scent of laundry detergent from the drying rack, the soft hum of the refrigerator, normal. But somehow wrong. Mira was late again. She used to text him whenever she stayed after work. "Don't wait for me, I'll be home late." But lately those messages came less often. And when they did, they felt rehearsed, like they were copied from somewhere else. Elias checked the clock. 1942. He wasn't the type to panic or obsess. He knew she had a demanding job, unpredictable hours, a boss who liked pushing deadlines. But the unease inside him didn't come from the time. It came from the patterned missed calls, short answers, a tired smile that never touched her eyes. 3 weeks ago, she used to tell him every detail about her day, the annoying coworker, the funny misunderstanding during lunch, the broken printer that nearly drove everyone insane. Now, whenever he asked how work had been, she simply said, "Fine." That word had become his enemy. He stood up, walked to the window, and watched the city mock him with its usual evening routine, cars crawling through traffic, people hurrying home, lights flickering on one floor after another in the opposite building. He wondered how many of those people felt the way he did right now, half anxious, half ashamed for being anxious. At 20:03, the lock clicked. Mira entered quickly, closing the door a little too softly, as if trying to make her arrival sound gentle. She looked exhausted, hair slightly messy, her bag slipping from her shoulder, cheeks red from the cold air outside. But there was something else in her eyes, something Elias couldn't quite decipher. A flicker, a shadow. Or maybe he was imagining it. "You're home late," he said quietly, keeping his voice neutral. "Yeah, things got complicated at work," she replied, taking off her coat without looking at him. It was an ordinary answer, completely ordinary. And yet the silence that followed it felt anything but. Elias noticed small things, the way she avoided meeting his gaze, the slight tremor in her fingers as she placed her phone on the counter, the faint scent of cologne on her clothes that definitely wasn't hers. His chest tightened. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't paranoid. He believed in trust more than anything else. But doubt had a way of crawling under the skin slowly, subtly, like cold creeping in through a barely open window. He sat back at the table while she walked to the sink, pretending to busy herself with washing her hands. "Mira," he said, not loudly but with enough weight to make her pause. "Is everything okay?" She froze for a second, just one, but he saw it. Then she nodded. "Of course. Just tired. Long day." Another ordinary answer, another sharp silence. Elias wanted to believe her. He desperately wanted to believe that he was overthinking, that nothing serious was happening, that this was just stress, exhaustion, the natural shift of two people dealing with the pressures of adulthood. But his mind replayed every recent change in her behavior like a slideshow he couldn't turn off. She dried her hands slowly and finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm, too calm, as if she had prepared herself for this moment before even stepping inside. "I'm going to take a shower," she said softly, and she left the room without waiting for him to respond. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the thin doorway she disappeared through. He heard the bathroom door close, the rush of water, the muted echoes of movement. The apartment felt even quieter now, stripped of anything that could distract him from the truth forming at the edge of his thoughts. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He wasn't ready to say it aloud, not yet. He wasn't ready to accuse, or question, or confront. That would mean acknowledging the possibility he feared most, the one thing he had always believed would never happen to him. But as he sat alone, feeling that cold silence pressing against him from all sides, Elias realized something he hadn't understood until now. This wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was simply the first moment he chose to see it. The next morning began like most mornings did, quietly. Mira was already gone by the time Elias woke up, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume in the hallway and a short message on the kitchen table: left early. Don't forget you have that meeting today. It was strange how a simple note could feel so distant. Elias read it twice, then set it down. He didn't feel angry. He wasn't even sure he felt hurt. It was something more complicated, a mix of unease and numbness, like he was watching his own life from across the room. He got ready in his usual, precise way. Shower, coffee, a quick glance at his inbox. But everything felt slightly off balance, as if the apartment itself knew there was a secret hiding inside it. By the time he reached work, he still hadn't shaken the feeling. His colleagues greeted him with the usual nods, half smiles, and morning complaints, but Elias barely registered any of it. He managed to get through the meeting, though he'd barely retained the details. Even his boss noticed. You all right today? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Just didn't sleep well, Elias replied. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. When lunch break came, he found himself wandering outside without thinking, eventually stopping near a small bench not far from his office. The same bench he and Mira had sat on 2 years earlier during their first long walk together. Back when everything felt effortless. He sat down, exhaling slowly as the city moved around him. Cars rushing by, people passing, conversations overlapping in the background. He took out his phone, meaning only to check the time, but his thumb hesitated when he saw the wallpaper, a photo of him and Mira at the coast last summer. Her smile back then was open, bright, real. Was it still real? He hated himself for the thought, but it didn't leave. After a few seconds, he opened their chat. The last 10 messages were short, functional, nothing like the long, warm conversations they used to have. He scrolled up. More short answers. More find later, busy. The change was unmistakable. Almost without thinking, he typed, "How's your day going?" He stared at the message. He didn't want to send something that sounded insecure or accusatory, but he needed something, a reaction, a sign, anything that felt familiar. He pressed send. The reply came 3 minutes later. Good. Talk after work. That was it. Before he could process how hollow it felt, his phone buzzed again, but not from her. It was a notification from his email, a reminder from his mobile carrier about his monthly storage backup. He almost swiped it away automatically, but then he noticed something odd. An unfamiliar device listed under the connected backups. His heart skipped. He opened the menu, staring at the details. A second device had synced with his account last week, a device he didn't own. Elias frowned, a slow dread pooling in his stomach. His carrier typically stored logs of call connections and message timestamps. If Mira had somehow used his account, whether intentionally or by accident, it could explain why some notifications had looked strange recently. He dug deeper into the activity log. And that's where he found it. A series of outgoing calls made from his account but not from his phone. They weren't calls to him. They weren't to family. They weren't to coworkers. They were to a single number he didn't recognize. The same number, repeated over multiple evenings, including last night. Elias stared at the log, his pulse pounding in his ears. He wasn't the jealous type. He wasn't someone who jumped to conclusions. But the pattern, the timing. There was no reason for someone else to be making those calls, and Mira was the only one who had access to his devices, his Wi-Fi, his passwords, not because he'd given her everything, but because they never expected to hide anything from each other. The number burned into his memory, slowly, almost mechanically. He copied it into his contacts just to check if it had any saved history. Nothing. His phone didn't recognize it. His chest felt tight. The bench under him suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. He told himself to breathe. There could be explanations. Work-related, accidental sensing, a glitch, someone else borrowing her phone, anything, but deep down, beneath the rational thoughts, beneath the hope, something inside him whispered a truth he didn't want to hear. Patterns don't lie. He locked his phone and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. People kept passing by it, their shadows sliding over the pavement. The world felt painfully normal while his own had shifted into something uncertain and fragile. He needed clarity, a conversation, a real one, not the soft evasions she had been giving him for weeks. Elias stood up, his hands cold despite the mild air, and walked back toward the office with a decision forming slowly, heavily. Tonight, he would ask her. Not accuse, not confront with anger, but finally ask the question that had been eating at him from the inside, and he wasn't sure which answer terrified him more, the truth or another lie. Elias drove home slower than usual that evening, not because of traffic, the roads were mostly clear, but because every turn felt heavier, every familiar street carried a strange pressure. The city lights blurred as his mind replayed the same question over and over. What if the truth isn't something he can handle? He parked outside the apartment complex and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The engine hummed softly, a faint distraction from the storm inside him. He checked his phone again. No message from Mira. It wasn't unusual for her to be busy, but tonight the silence felt deliberate, calculated. He finally stepped out of the car, each footstep echoing louder than it should have against the pavement. When he reached the apartment door, he paused with the key halfway in the lock. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he expected to hear voices inside, or movement, or something that would justify the fear twisting in his chest. But everything was quiet. He unlocked the door. The living room lights were on. Mira's shoes set neatly by the hallway, exactly where she always left them. For a moment, everything looked normal, painfully, deceptively normal. He called, and here her voice responded from the kitchen. "Come." "To come." Elias walked in and found her stirring something on the stove, the soft light casting a warm glow on her face. She looked composed, as though nothing in their world had shifted at all. "Hey," she said, glancing at him briefly before returning to the pot. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." She didn't hug him. She didn't kiss him. She didn't even look long enough to notice the tension radiating off him. Elias nodded silently, removing his jacket. He wasn't sure how to start the conversation he'd been rehearsing all day. He sat at the table, watching her. She moved around the kitchen smoothly, almost robotically, as if performing a routine she'd memorized long ago. Finally, he spoke. "Mira, can we talk?" She paused for a fraction of a second. A fraction, but enough for him to notice. Then she turned around slowly. "Sure, what about?" Elias swallowed. "About us. About what's been going on lately." Her expression didn't change. It was unreadable, guarded. "What do you mean?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "You've been distant," he said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady. "We hardly talk anymore. You're always busy, always tired. And when we're together, you feel far away." He waited. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Work's just been stressful." "I told you that." "I know," Elias replied softly. "But it feels like more than that." Double quotes silence. She looked down at the floor for a moment, a long moment, then back up at him with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're overthinking," she said gently. "We're fine, really." It sounded rehearsed, practiced, a ready-made response for situations like this. Elias stared at her, searching for something: sincerity, reassurance, even a flicker of doubt. But her expression stayed frustratingly neutral. He took a breath. "Then can you explain something?" he asked. Her posture stiffened. "Explain what?" He reached into his pocket and set his phone on the table. "There's a device synced to my account," he said quietly. "Not mine. It's been making calls. Repeated calls. To the same number." Her face paled, not dramatically, not enough for someone else to notice. But Elias caught it instantly. A small, involuntary reaction. "I don't know anything about that," she said too quickly. He didn't interrupt. He simply held her gaze. She shifted uncomfortably, her arms tightening across her chest. "Maybe it's a glitch. You're always saying your phone's acting slow." "This wasn't slow," Elias replied. "It was specific." He could see her mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. "Elias, you're being paranoid," she said, forcing a laugh. "Why would I use your account to call someone? That doesn't even make sense." "Then tell me who the number belongs to." Her jaw clenched. "I don't know." He paused. "Mira," he said quietly, "I'm not accusing you. I just want the truth." For the first time that evening, emotion flickered across her face. Frustration, fear, something tangled between the two. She turned away from him, running her hand through her hair. "I can't deal with this right now," she muttered. "I'm tired." "I told you work has been." "This isn't work," Elias interrupted, his voice still soft but firm. "This is us." She didn't move. He stood slowly, walking up behind her but keeping a respectful distance. "I'm not trying to control you," he continued. "I'm not trying to accuse you of anything. But something's wrong, and pretending everything is fine won't fix it." When she finally turned around, her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with anger restrained by something deeper. "Fear or guilt? You're making a problem where there isn't one," she said. "You always do this. You always read into things." Elias felt something inside him crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a thread snapping. He'd always trusted her, always believed the best in her, always tried to listen, understand, adapt. But now there was a wall between them, built from half answers and forced smiles. He stepped back. "Okay," he said softly. "If you say there's nothing going on, then I'll believe you." She looked surprised. She expected him to push, to demand more. But he didn't. He headed toward the hallway. "Dinner smells good," he added quietly. "I'll wash up." He didn't wait for her reply. Behind him, he heard her exhale deeply, a shaky, an even breath that said far more than her words ever had. And as he stepped into the bathroom, closing the door gently behind him, one thought echoed louder than anything else. If there was truly nothing to hide, why did she look so afraid? Elias didn't sleep that night. He lay beside Mira in the dim bedroom, staring at the ceiling while she breathed steadily beside him. Her breathing pattern had always comforted him in the past, a slow, soft rhythm that meant she felt safe, calm, close. But tonight it felt distant, almost unfamiliar, like the sound belonged to someone he no longer recognized. At 3:17 a.m., he finally got out of bed. He moved silently through the apartment, the wooden floor cool under his feet. The living room felt colder than usual, shadows stretching across the space like dark threads, pulling everything tight. He stared at the framed photo on the shelf, the two of them at the lake, smiling, sunburned, unaware of how fragile things truly were. He touched the frame with his fingertips. For months, he had chalked up every small change to stress, fatigue, bad timing. He'd convinced himself they just needed rest, space, a good conversation, a vacation, something, anything to reset the rhythm they once had. But trust didn't break in explosions. It cracked slowly, silently, like ice beneath the surface of a frozen lake. When he returned to the kitchen, the moonlight revealed something on the counter he hadn't seen earlier. Mira's work bag unzipped, a corner of a paper sticking out. He hesitated. He didn't want to invade her privacy. That was a line he'd promised himself never to cross. Relationships, he believed, were built on trust, not surveillance. But then he remembered her face earlier, the fear she tried to hide, the defensiveness, the half-dash answers. And the unknown device calling an unknown number. Elias closed his eyes briefly, then gently pulled the paper out. It wasn't a paper. It was a hotel invoice. His chest tightened instantly. The date was from 2 days ago. One room, a single night, paid with Mira's card. The time on the invoice matched the same hours she had told him she was working late. He sat down, gripping the paper so hard the edges bent. For a moment, everything inside him felt suspended. Not quite anger, not quite heartbreak. More like the numbness that came right after touching something too hot. He placed the invoice back exactly where he found it, returned the bag to its original position, and went to wash his face. When the cold water hit his skin, his reflection in the mirror looked hollow, a version of himself he barely recognized. By morning, he had made a decision. Not to accuse, not to demand, not to shout, but to observe. To listen, to collect the truth piece by piece, instead of fighting shadows. When Mira woke, she acted normal. Almost too normal. "Morning," she said, walking into the kitchen, hair messy, still half asleep. "Morning," Elias replied, pouring coffee. She yawned. "Didn't hear you get up." "I woke early," he lied. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded, rubbing her temples. "Yeah, yesterday was long. Thanks for the talk, by the way. I know I was a little short." He handed her the mug, their fingers brushing. She didn't pull away, but she didn't linger either. He studied her carefully. Mira was complicated, always hard to read, always quiet, but usually honest. If she was hiding something now, it wasn't because she was careless. It was because she believed she could keep everything compartmentalized. "Do you have plans for today?" Elias asked casually. "Work," she said quickly. "Too quickly?" He nodded. "Want me to drive you?" She hesitated for half a second before answering. "No, I'm good. I'll take the train." Half a second, not long, but enough. She left at 8:42 a.m. Elias watched her from the window as she walked down the street. When she disappeared around the corner, he grabbed his jacket and followed, keeping distance, moving slowly, watching carefully. Mira didn't walk to the train station. She went the opposite direction. Elias felt his stomach drop, but he kept walking, steps steady, heart pounding. Mira turned left, then right, moving briskly as if she had somewhere specific to be, somewhere she couldn't admit. After 10 minutes, she reached a quiet street lined with tall oak trees. A black SUV was parked at the curb. A man stepped out. Tall, well-dressed, confident. He smiled when he saw her, not the polite smile co-workers shared, but something warmer, familiar. Mira smiled back. Elias stopped behind a parked car, breath caught in his throat. The man placed a hand on Mira's arm, and she didn't pull away. They talked softly, too far for Elias to hear. Then the man stepped closer, lowering his head slightly to speak near her ear. She laughed. Elias had not heard her laugh like that in months. Something inside him twisted painfully. Not anger. Not yet. Just a cold realization washing over everything he thought he knew. The man opened the passenger door for her. She got in. The SUV drove away. Elias stood there long after the car disappeared. His mind was empty and loud at the same time, a storm without direction. He walked back home slowly, the city around him blurred and distant. When he reached the apartment, he sat on the couch and stared at the wall. Minutes passed, then hours. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal he had just witnessed, or the fact that he still wanted to understand why. At 1:10 p.m., his phone buzzed. Mira, heading home later than usual. Long day. Don't wait for me for dinner. Elias stared at the message, a lie wrapped in the same calm tone she'd always used. He typed nothing back. Instead, he stood up, walked to their bedroom, and opened the drawer where he kept the small wooden memory box he rarely touched. Inside were letters, photos, small keepsakes from their early years. Proof of a time when everything felt effortless, when her eyes met his without hesitation, without secrets. He closed the box and whispered the words he hadn't allowed himself to think until now. "When did you stop choosing me?" When evening fell, he made another decision, one that felt heavy but necessary. He would talk to her, not with blind trust, not with fear, but with clarity. But first, he needed to hear the truth from her own mouth, because the cracks were no longer cracks. They were breaking points, and they were spreading fast. The night felt strangely hollow, as if the city itself had paused to watch how everything would finally unfold. Daniel walked through the dimly lit streets without knowing exactly where he was going. The cold air didn't calm him. It only sharpened the weight inside his chest. He kept replaying every moment, every lie, every silence, every sign he had ignored. When he reached the apartment building, he hesitated, not because he was afraid of what he might find inside. That fear had burned out long ago, but because he knew that once he stepped through the door, there would be no more excuses, no more pretending, no more delaying the inevitable. The truth was already exposed, undeniable, irreversible. All that remained was deciding what to do with it. He unlocked the door quietly. The apartment was still. The lights were off except for the faint glow leaking from the living room. He heard movement, soft, anxious, like someone pacing. She was waiting for him. Daniel entered the room slowly. Amelia stood near the window, her hands clasped tightly, eyes red as if she hadn't slept in days. She flinched when she saw him but didn't look away. This time there would be no more evasions, no more manipulations disguised as apologies. Daniel. Her voice cracked. Can we talk? We're already talking, he said, but his tone wasn't sharp. It was tired, too tired for anger. She looked at him as if searching for something in his expression, something that would give her a chance to rewrite what she had broken. But nothing there softened for her the way it once had. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. But I'm not asking to erase what happened. I just want to tell you the truth. All of it. He didn't respond. He didn't encourage. He didn't refuse. He just watched her, not because he hoped for honesty, but because he deserved it after everything. She took a breath and began speaking, this time without theatrics or excuses. She explained how it started, why she hid it, why she let it continue even when she knew she was destroying the one person who had trusted her completely. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't shift the blame. It was the first real honesty she had offered him in months. When she finished, the silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the air. Daniel let it settle before he finally answered. I appreciate the truth, he said quietly, but knowing the details doesn't change what it is. It doesn't change what it did to us. He walked past her and sat on the edge of the couch. His hands rested on his knees, fingers curled, not from anger but from trying to stay steady. You made a choice, he continued, more than once. And every time, it pulled us further apart. Amelia wiped her face but didn't approach him. She seemed to know she had no right to stand closer than the distance he kept. I know, she whispered. I know I lost you. But I'm still here if you want anything from me. Even if it's just closure. Daniel looked at her with an expression she had never seen from him before. Not hatred, not love, not even resentment. Just acceptance. Acceptance of what had happened and what could never return. You didn't lose me, he said. You let me go long before I knew what was happening. The words landed softly, but they were final. He stood up. I'm moving out tomorrow. She nodded slowly. She didn't try to stop him. Maybe for the first time, she understood that consequences were not threats. They were reality. Daniel picked up his jacket and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. I hope you learn from this, he said. Not for me. For yourself. Then he left. The hallway felt lighter than the apartment. The air outside felt clearer than the air inside. For the first time in months, Daniel wasn't trapped in uncertainty. The truth had hurt, but it had also freed him. Not instantly, not magically, but enough to let him take the first step away from everything that had been suffocating him. As he walked into the night, the city didn't feel paused anymore. It moved around him, alive and indifferent, reminding him that the end of something wasn't the end of everything. And for the first time, he believed that.